Look, we all know the prices of houses have skyrocketed, but what about if you finally found one of those too good to be true deals? You know, the deal of the lifetime, the hidden gem. Hey guys, there's a sucker born every minute. Don't be a sucker. This could be a lie, and it also could be a trap. Now, as you know, I'm making these videos to educate the public and to help you to avoid those pitfalls that are costly. So here are the 16 things that you need to look for when you're buying an affordable home, and also what to stay away from. So give me a thumbs up if you're good with that. Number one is flood zones. Now, be careful, guys, because everything looks great on paper until you see one of these houses listed a little bit cheaper than the others in surrounding area neighborhoods. And if that home sits on low-lying land, you could walk into a nightmare. Now look, flood zones just aren't along the coast. Now we're seeing them everywhere in the nation. North Carolina, Kentucky, California, even Las Vegas in the desert has flooding. It's happening. Look, a few days of bad rain, rivers are flowing. And even if the drainage is bad, it can make the house be in a flood risk. It may seem safe, but if it happened one time before, guess what? It's purely luck if it's not going to happen again. Now, the easiest way to spot a potential flood risk is to look for clues throughout the whole entire neighborhood. Now, houses nearby, if they're sitting on stilts or if they're elevated on foundations, it's a sign that there's flooding that could be an issue in the area. Now, if you see a vacant lot next to a home with another house where it used to be, sometimes houses get torn down after flooding. And even if the house looks good now, it might have problems with foundation and other issues. So flood damage can be fixed cosmetically, but the structural issues and the hidden mold and other issues, they can stay on for years. You really need to do your homework. Checking the FEMA flood maps isn't the only thing. Remember, flood maps, they change over time. So even if the place seems kind of safe before, it might get flagged into the future. So a good tip is to talk to neighbors to give you a clue and ask them if they've seen flooding on the street or any nearby homes. Now, even if the house is technically outside of a flood zone, there can still be a risk from the outside surrounding areas where water collects and it stands quickly. You'll be on an island. Number two is mold. Now, mold can hide in places even if it's not in a moist area. And these are places that you wouldn't even expect. And the damage is really already severe by the time it becomes obvious. Use your nose when you walk into a house. Sometimes the only clue is a musty smell. So if you walk into a home and something seems to be off, that's a red flag. If the house has a history of leaks or flooding or poor ventilation, just assume that there's a risk. It's going to cost you money and it's not going to be cheap. Number three, buying in the wrong location. Now look, the neighborhood can change drastically in just a few years. We've seen it all the time. And it's not always a good thing either, because picking the right location, this is going to be super important. So let's say that the area feels quiet and charming right now, but there's a major road expansion that's planned. You know what that means for the future? Heavy traffic can be a serious problem. Now, new buildings and developments also can change a neighborhood completely, and sometimes making living there a lot harder and even harder to sell your house later on. So the city might decide if your street needs to be part of a new widening project, you could be forced to move. So you always want to check your local zoning laws and city planning documents. Now, many cities, even in new construction neighborhoods, have this information online. Now, the real estate agent that you're working with, they should be skilled and they should be able to help you with this, especially if they know the neighborhood very well and they know what's coming in the future years. Number four is location and what more to consider. The location plays a massive role in whether this home is really truly affordable. So you might consider on how much you'll spend in the long run, because living in a cheaper town really means nothing if you have to drive 30 minutes to get to the grocery store or an hour to get to a doctor, because groceries, gas costs, vehicle maintenance, all this stuff adds up. And there's a cost to this. So your deal can quickly cancel out any savings that you got on that purchase price. You also want to consider how far emergency services are, because how long does it actually take for police or an ambulance to reach your house in case of emergency? Plus, you can always visit the neighborhood at different times a day, and this is a very good idea because you want to get an authentic feeling of what it feels like to live there. Now, some neighborhoods, again, they're quiet in the morning, but they become noisy or even unsafe at night. So if you work remotely, also check your cell phone. It may not have great internet availability or even reception. Some rural areas actually have very spotty coverage, so you want to make sure that you got good coverage. Number five is roof issues. Now, roof issues only get worse over time. They don't get better. So if you notice the sagging roof, or it has missing shingles, or there's water stains in the ceiling, these are signs that the roof might be having a failing issue. Now, even if it looks like it's a little small problem and can quickly escalate into something much bigger, because here's the deal, a full replacement can easily cost between $16,000 and $18,000, and sometimes there's underlying damage under the structure beneath. The problem is that roof damage isn't always obvious when you're standing on the ground. Sellers, they can do quick patchwork to hide leaks. They could have a fresh coat of paint on the ceiling and might cover up those water stains. So you can't rely on what you actually see during a quick walkthrough. Number 6 is the roof trusses. Here's a big one, guys. You don't want your roof to fall in on your head, right? So roof trusses are actually the skeleton of your roof. And if you see any sagging or bowing or unevenness in the roof line, that's a huge red flag. It's also money. So in short, if you're looking at a house and you see anything that looks suspicious on the roof, you got to get it inspected thoroughly before you buy, before you put that offer in. And don't rely on a seller's word or even a general home inspection. You really need a specialist, a roofing specialist, to check those trusses. And number 7 is cracks in the foundation. You know, what's worse than a roof falling in on your head? The whole house falling in, right? The home's foundation holds everything together. And if there's a problem with it, it's one of the most expensive repairs in a home. Now, many buyers, they walk into a house, they might fall in love, they see a few hairline cracks, they assume it's no big deal, right? Those tiny crack fractures could be a sign of something much worse. Shifting soil, water damage that's already eating away at the structure. Because what happens is over time, these cracks don't get smaller, they expand. And uneven floors, doors, windows, stuff that doesn't close properly, this is a true sign of a major structural failure that can cost thousands and thousands of dollars to fix. Now, the problem with foundational issues is they aren't always obvious. I mean, some sellers, they'll try to cover them with paint, as I said, anything just to sell that house. And others might not even know that they're selling a house with damage that they've been living in. So that's why a professional inspection is needed. And you visit that house for an inspection, you'll also notice these unusual things, again, like the uneven floors, visible cracks in walls, sticking doors. Could be something lurking even further in. Number 8 is erosion. Now, this might not be an immediately visible thing if you walk in that front door, but it can be a sign that the ground that your home is actually standing on is unstable. So what you want to do is walk completely around the house. You're going to look for signs of soil loss. You're going to look for ditches and patches and sinkholes. If you see bare patches of earth or places where the ground just seems to be washed away, check for signs of water runoff. Where is the water going when it actually gets into the yard? Look for gullies or areas where the water actually stands and pools. Number 9 is meth labs. Now, this might sound crazy, but you got to watch out for it because houses could have been used as a meth lab. And it's really important for you to think about this problem because the chemicals that they use to make meth, they can stick around a long time after that meth lab is gone. Chemicals can get into the walls, the carpet, and even air ducts, making it a serious health hazard. You always want to ask for disclosure documents and any past records to see if that property has any kind of a checkered past history. Now, this stuff, you got to do some of this on your own. You want to check for news articles about raids or other unlawful activity at that address or surrounding addresses. Very important. Do your work, right? Don't rely solely on a general home inspection. And if you suspect some kind of a past contamination in the house, it's probably best just to walk away because your health and your safety are much more important than any kind of a deal, no matter how good it looks. Number 10 is buying in rural areas. Now, rural properties, they do come with hidden costs. Whether you believe it or not, that price might be cheaper, but there's always a hidden cost. Because the further you are from a city, the further you are from other things that are conveniences, more problems that you could face. So before you buy, think about all of the trade-offs. Number 11, future changes. Now, life changes. It's a fact. Nobody's getting younger. But what you will need in the future is going to differ from what you need today. Now, your housing needs are also going to change with it. So you got to think ahead, think forward. You might think that, this property fits your budget now or the layout or the lifestyle, but you got to also consider what your future needs are going to be. Because think about this. Let's say you don't have kids now, but when you do, you have to rethink about schools and are the good ones nearby, or how about daycare, and you get a little older, are you going to want those steps to go up to the bedroom, right? So these are things that are going to be huge priorities down the road, maybe not today, but it's not just about kids. If your health changes, you need to be closer to medical care, right? And what kind of what ifs might come up in your life? Better to consider this stuff before buying. Now, number 12 is property lines and easements. Now, this is the stuff that you can't see with your eyes, but as a real estate agent for the last 20 years, I have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And having the knowledge and skill to deal with this stuff is super important. Now, I know how complicated these disputes can get over time. If you knew what I knew, trust me. You might think that you're buying a full backyard, only to find out later that half of your backyard legally belongs to your neighbor. So you don't want that kind of stuff. Number 13, homeowners associations or HOAs. HOAs can be either a blessing, a nightmare, or a curse. Now, in the United States, most new home communities, they're falling within a HOA somewhere. So in the US, it's mostly a nightmare. Many people are having problems with these. So many people just don't want to buy in an HOA neighborhood. And I understand this because I've heard from you guys saying, I don't want an HOA. And you're instantly cutting off the number of huge houses that could fit your criteria. So instead, what I want you to do is think about this before you buy your house. Before you buy, get all of the HOA paperwork. And I'm talking about the rules, the meeting minutes, the financial statements, everything before. And so I want you to realize that not all HOAs are the same. Some are great, but I'm going to tell you something. Some are absolutely terrible and you want to run away from. But you got to find the ones that are great because they could be low HOAs and a great place to live. So it's beyond basic paperwork. Just consider the community's history with its HOA. You want to talk to the homeowners and find out if the HOA is really managed well, or are they burning money, or are they consistently fighting with the board, or what else is going on. That's where the meeting minutes come in. And this will give you a good idea of what's really going on in the neighborhood. And always check the HOA financial health before buying because I've seen the numbers. You got to look at those numbers. If the HOA is struggling financially, they're going to hit you with some unexpected fees to cover some of those maintenance shortfalls. And again, on the other hand, there are some winners. Now, number 14 is foreclosures and auction properties, especially in HOA communities. Now, a lot of people, they think of foreclosures a deal, and we haven't seen many of those recently. So just use your head and your eyes and your ears if you're thinking about this. If you're looking for affordable housing, you'll look across properties that are foreclosed or properties that are going up for auction, right? And these can be a great way to find a cheap house, but they also come with risks. You know, the house might need tons of repairs because the people didn't have the money to make those repairs. Or there could also be legal issues. I've seen this before. Nothing looks like it's a problem, but when they go to get a title on this thing, there's all kinds of liens. There's all kinds of debts that are attached to the property. Plus, the previous owner may not have paid their HOA fees or any other fees that are going on. And you don't want to inherit any of those unpaid fees if you go to an auction and you buy this place. So if you're thinking about buying a foreclosure or auction property, don't fall into a money pit. You want to find out if there's any unpaid fees, liens, any kind of legal battles before you get involved. Number 15 is the title search, the title work, and title insurance. So basically what I'm saying here is the title is a legal history of that house. And if it's messy, you could be in trouble. It's like hot potato. Everybody wants to pass this thing along, and whoever's left standing, they got it. Now, a title search is supposed to make sure that that seller is actually the right person to sell you that house. But sometimes, you've heard about title fraud, right? There are hidden problems, like unpaid debts and mistakes in that paperwork, and things that can pop up years later and then lead to a legal battle that you don't want for yourself, right? You never want to assume that the title is clean just because everything looks good on the surface. So a proper title search is a must if you want to close that deal. Now, this search may uncover any outstanding debts and things like property taxes or fees or liens, medicals, any things that are attached to that house, any kind of loans. That stuff has to be cleared out before you get title to your home. Now, sometimes even old claims on houses on property aren't properly cleared from the previous owner, right? The previous owner's family could try to challenge your ownership. Some properties have old claims that weren't properly cleared, meaning the previous owner's family member could try to challenge you and take that house from you. You don't want these issues. Number 16 is buying land and building a house. Now, first, you have to deal with zoning laws and land use restrictions. Now, not all land is buildable. I know it may look great, but it's not. Some plots, they actually have zoning laws or even overlays on top of zoning laws that prevent building houses. Everything may look good if you're looking at it on paper, but there's some kind of other issue that's stopping this thing from getting built. So even if the plot is zoned for housing, there's likely to be additional studies or permitting requirements that will add time and costs to the project. So the infrastructure to your home is also the next consideration whenever you buy land. You know, it's unlike if you're buying an existing house because you're going to have other issues. You're not going to have the utilities like water, like sewer, or electricity. And connecting these utilities can be a lot more expensive than you thought. And in some cases, you might need to install a well, a septic system, or maybe even a lift system, which again requires permits and additional maintenance. Now, construction costs themselves are always a significant factor. So building isn't always cheaper than buying. Whether the contractor has issues or supply chain disruptions or inflation or all this stuff can throw off your timeline, which will always hit you with what? More expenses. So I did a whole nother video on this, is whether to buy or to build, and you might want to check it out here on this channel. But as far as tips, I just mentioned 16 red flags, but after doing this for 20 years, I have seen many, many, many disasters that could have been completely avoided. But on the other hand, I've also seen many, many, many pure wins. The house is nothing to play with. You want to do it right the first time. And if you're thinking about buying, I just want to say thank you for any purchase considerations. My team is always here to help you make your purchase, not just a wise decision, but a smooth one as well. We want you to have not average, but way above average. And you want to have massive amounts of knowledge to be sure that you have seen all of your best options that you could possibly make in your current marketplace. So if you want to buy an affordable home here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, or anywhere else in the United States, my team is here to help you. Just give us a call at 843-839-9870. And if you're not in our area, we can hook you up with the trusted local real estate expert in your area too. So if you never want to miss one of these helpful selling videos, remember to ring that bell. See you in the next episode.